Mississippi sports fans. My name is Nick Suss. I am the Ole Miss beat reporter here at the Clarion Ledger, and welcome to the inaugural edition of what will end up becoming the soon-to-be-named Clarion Ledger Sports Podcast. I am joined today by our in-house sports videographer, Mackenzie Salmon.
What's up?
And by our Mississippi State beat writer, Tyler Horka.
How's it going, y'all?
We are fresh out of the pavilion, where Mississippi State just defeated Ole Miss 81-75 in basketball, meaning that the two schools have split their two meetings this year. Ole Miss winning in Starkville and Mississippi State winning in Oxford. We're probably going to get to talking about signing day and all of the preps stars in the state of Mississippi who will be signing next week a little bit later, but we're going to start off here by talking about the basketball game that we just saw. Tyler, Mackenzie, what were your thoughts on the Bulldogs' big win today?
Well, obviously, Mississippi State came out and had two different starters than usual. Reggie Perry came in and started for Eric Holman. Eric Holman's he's had a bit of an up and down go at things in conference play. He was supposed to be one of the centerpieces of this team, and even after the win today, in which he had 0 points in 9 minutes of play, head coach Ben Howland said that for Mississippi State to do what they want to do this year, Eric Holman still has to be really good. Today he wasn't, but Reggie Perry was. He had 21 points, 11 rebounds. Quindary Witherspoon did his thing. He had 27, is that right, guys? 27 points? 27. Obviously, he was the main cog in today's victory, but if Reggie Perry plays the way that he played today down the rest of the conference stretch, then Mississippi State could be pretty good and even maybe have a winning record in conference.
Yeah, Mackenzie, you were down on the floor for this game. You were watching it from floor level. It seemed like Mississippi State just out-toughed Ole Miss the entire game. Was it obvious down from where you were just how much bigger and more physical Mississippi State was?
Yeah, and even though I was on the side by Mississippi State's bench, it just seems like, Perry, like you said, had a great game tonight, and Q Witherspoon as well, but I just feel like watching this team, how much I've seen them, they don't feel like they're into it as much as Ole Miss wants, and especially with Olenichek, I always mess him up. I feel like him in the post, 0 points, that really hurt Ole Miss tonight, especially with them shutting him down. Had he had at least 10 points, that would have been huge. I know it was kind of an off game for him.
Brian Tyree, obviously, Nick, was the main reason Ole Miss was even in this game late.
Yeah. Brian Tyree is the second leading scorer in the SEC, third leading scorer in the SEC. He's been up there all season for a reason. He put up 25, 5 of 7 from 3 today. The team as a whole was 11 of 21 from 3. They shot better than 50% from 3 and still lost because State was so much better on the glass, 12 rebound advantage, 9 rebound advantage on the offensive glass alone. When your two centers combined for 1 rebound, and it was an offensive rebound on a shot the player himself missed and tipped back in, that's just such a dreadful showing. But we could talk about this game individually forever, but I think it's probably more productive to say, what did this mean? State obviously has 2 pretty tough games coming up next week. Ole Miss has a bit of a reprieve. There's no reprieve truly in the SEC, but a little bit easier than what it's been going after. From the State angle, and I'll touch on the Ole Miss angle a little bit later, but from the State angle, what does this confidence mean after a Kentucky loss, after an Alabama loss, to get a big win on the road?
This was the 3rd straight Saturday that Mississippi State fought back to get to 500 in league play. So they started 0-2, and then they won a couple in a row to get to 2-2. Then it was 2-3, 3-3, 3-4. Now it's 4-4. You get the feeling that at some point they're going to have to get over that hump of 500 in conference play. But as you mentioned, they have a ranked LSU team next week during the week, and then Saturday they have Kentucky coming to Humphrey Coliseum. So at that point, if you say you're going to lose to LSU at home, which obviously they could play well in that game, I think LSU poses a lot of problems for them. But if the favored team wins that game, then you're playing Kentucky, trying to do the same thing, get to 5-5 in conference play. Obviously, nobody in this league aside from Tennessee is going to be favored against Kentucky in just about any game. Yeah. So you could be as good as you feel today if you're Mississippi State for getting a road victory against a bitter rival, someone who already beat you on your home floor. You have 2 really tough games, and you could be 2 games under 500 in conference play before you know it.
Yeah, the opposite is true of Ole Miss right now, which is they need this week to stabilize, whereas LSU and Kentucky are going to be such tough tests. For State, you look at Ole Miss, they've got A&M on Wednesday, and then they go to Athens to play Georgia on Saturday. Those are two of the lower-ranked teams in the SEC. You really need these wins to stabilize. Ole Miss has lost 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 6 at this point. They've lost 4 in a row. You can't lose a gimme to a team like A&M or a team like Georgia. And I understand there are no gimmies in the SEC, but you can't lose those games if you want to keep what slim hopes Ole Miss has for the tournament alive at this point. Alive. You really do have to win those games. And State was a winnable game. They knew it. They'd already beaten State before. It slipped through their fingers. You can't blame them. State's a good team for a reason. You don't be ranked in the top 25 despite losing almost every week without having some level of talent that people are noticing. But for Ole Miss, man, I mean, you look at this A&M game, you look at this Georgia game. If you don't go 2-0 this week, you're probably not playing in the big tournament in March. You're stuck in the second tournament, and that's not what any Ole Miss fan wants to hear right now, but it's probably the truth.
But as weird as this day was for Ole Miss, it was only a 6-point margin in this game. If they somehow win, if they're the ones that won by 6 points, everyone would be saying this was the win that's going to kickstart our NCAA tournament run.
Yeah, which was also true. They lost to Florida on Wednesday because Florida hit a 25-footer as time expired, or with 4 seconds left in regulation to send it to overtime. I mean, they are a handful of buckets away from going 2-0 against 2 tournament teams this week. But as it shook out, they went 0-2.
And I think, like Coach Howland said, too, it doesn't get easier from here. And if Mississippi State wants to get over that 500 mark, they're going to need to do something. I just feel like the guys don't – not that they lack fluidity on offense. I just feel like they're not – their hearts aren't, like, into – they don't look like they're really having fun out there. But, I mean, you guys – what do you guys think? I mean, looking out there, of course they get hyped whenever someone makes a 3, but when they're down, they're down.
There was a point when I turned to Nick during the game and I told him Mississippi State's not going to win this basketball game. I've seen this movie before. Ole Miss was winning for most of the first half, I'd say.
There was a lot of back and forth, but Ole Miss was leading quite a bit.
For 20 minutes, and Ole Miss led for 17. So it was a pretty even.
For most of the early part of the game, though, I think Ole Miss was winning. They had the halftime lead, Ole Miss did, yeah. And it was back and forth in the first part of that first half, and Mississippi State would get close, but they just couldn't take the lead. And I told Nick, I don't see them winning this ball game. I've seen them play in these games. Alabama was one of these types of games where Alabama controlled the lead for most of the game. Mississippi State inched closer a couple times but couldn't get over the hump. They lost, and that was only 4 or 5 days ago. So I thought it would be the same story, but credit Mississippi State for once they got that lead, they played really efficient basketball on both ends of the floor to get that win.
For those of you curious, I think my exact response to Ty when he said Mississippi State is going to lose this game was, So I wasn't as bullish on the Rebels holding on to the win as Tyler was, but
it was nothing. It wasn't about Ole Miss for me though. It was I've seen Mississippi State play in these types of games, and Mississippi State fans have seen it too. You know, they're very frustrated with this team right now, and we're talking about conference records. I'm gonna get back to that point and just make one final point on that. If somehow their conference record is still even at 500 at this time next week, I think Mississippi State fans will be more than happy with that. If you split games against LSU and Kentucky, they're going to be in a good spot.
So, we have anything else left we want to say about basketball, or do we want to transition to the chunk of the show being what we're getting on Wednesday, the busiest day or the former busiest day in recruiting? Signing day isn't as big as it used to be with the early signing period now, but I mean, in Mississippi, this is the much bigger day because there's one kid making a bit of a choice that's going to make some headlines all across the country in like 3 different sports. Professional football,
you know,
college
who
football,
even knows at this point? Maybe horseback riding, like horses.
Who knows? We're, of course, talking about Jerrion Ely. Mackenzie is much more intimately familiar with Ely's situation than Ty or I are, being situated in Jackson like you are. Yeah. What are you thinking? Where's he leaning? What sport does he like? I mean, what do you think about this whole Ely situation?
Yeah, so I remember when I first met Ely, it was before the football season had even started. And I remember him telling me his heart was in football. It wasn't as much in baseball, but he knows that baseball could lead to a lot of other opportunities. It could be a smarter decision. Well, of course, he has a great season playing football, and that ends. And then, of course, with the early signing period coming up, people thought he may have signed. He didn't. in my opinion, I thought for a while he might go Clemson route because he dropped a lot of hints like, I want to go to somewhere that gives me joy. It gives me joyous. And, of course, that was Clemson's word for this past season was joy. And so I was like, he's smart enough to drop those kind of hints. If he were to go to Clemson, that's where he'd go. But I've heard from people that he might be choosing the pro route and seeing what his options are there. I'm excited to see where he goes, honestly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation. I mean, especially coming off the heels or continuing on the heels of the Kyler Murray situation, it's fascinating the parallels that Jerrion has. But, I mean, the biggest difference between Jerrion and Kyler is...
He's good at baseball.
Kyler, for what it's worth, was the...
His was based on, like, potential.
It was pure potential. Jerrion has proven to be the baseball player he is. I think there are 4 players in the history of high school sports who have been Under Armour All-Americans in both baseball and football. One was Kyler Murray. One is Jerrion Ealy. One was former Ole Miss wide receiver A.J. Brown. I'm blanking on who the 4th one was. But Ealy is shaping out to be the first one of any of them who could choose the pro baseball route. And I think that's just because he is such a highly touted prospect. It's fascinating. I mean, State's on the table for Jerrion Ealy. Ole Miss is on the table for Jerrion Ealy. Clemson seemed to be the favorite for his services coming through January when he decommitted from Ole Miss. But, I mean, I think if you ask anyone around the camp right now, nobody can say confidently which sport he's leaning to or which college he's leaning to.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny because he talks to so many different people. He gets so many interviews. Nick Saban was on the Jackson Prep campus the other day. It's just like, even if he chose Alabama, like no one would. I feel like any option is available right now.
It is amazing how hush-hush this has all been for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't read the story that our colleague Wilson Alexander wrote about Jerrion's thought process, he's not your average kid, as you would expect from somebody who's so talented as he is. He's so disciplined. Usually, I mean, the 3 of us can sometimes smell the stink when an athlete is lying. We're pretty good at hearing when they're saying the company line. I truly believe that Jerrion is focusing one day at a time. I mean, that's a cliche for almost everybody else, but I truly believe that Jerrion is not thinking about this decision as much as some other kids would be focused on.
Yeah, well, I remember during the season, too, he would tell us he devotes time to everything he does. Everything's planned out. After a certain time in the day, he just turns off his phone and doesn't get texts from people. That is discipline, and that right there should show you, I mean, he deserves to be up here, considering pro options with how much time he puts into his talent.
Yeah, let's talk about this from an Ole Miss and from a State perspective. Ty, where would he fit into a Joe Moorhead offense? Yeah. How frequently do you think he would play? I know there is a returning running back who started or played a lot of games at State last year, but when you have a 5-star running back who is considering Mississippi State, how does he fit into the future if he chooses the Bulldogs?
I think it would make the running back dynamic at Mississippi State really interesting. You have Kylan Hill, who is a guy who he's going to be a junior next year, and he's a guy that, let's just say he's not very quiet. So if you add a 5-star running back, one of the best running back recruits in the country, a guy who just set an Under Armour All-American game record for most rushing yards, if you add that to the fold, it kind of reminds me of, Justin Fields going from Georgia to Ohio State, and Tate Martell, he's already been there for a couple of years. Kylan Hill's been here for a couple of years. Kylan Hill is a guy that has been rumored to want to transfer. It might all be bluffing, and you know how kids are these days, but it would make the running back dynamic really interesting. I don't know if that's what Jerrion Ealy wants. It's certainly not what Kylan Hill wants. So as much as Mississippi State fans want Jerrion Ealy because he's a guy that can change an offense, I don't really see it happening just because of how cloudy it would make some things.
I mean, you never want to throw this comparison out immediately, but when you're Joe Moorhead and you're recruiting a 5-star running back, you have an ace in your back pocket by getting to say, do you want to be Saquon? And that's a pretty alluring offer for a running back nowadays. I don't think he has the same profile as Saquon Barkley. I don't think he has the same raw strength as Saquon Barkley would. But that's a pretty good recruiting pitch for Jerrion Ealy.
And also the baseball aspect,
of
too.
Course.
The problem is for Jerrion is, do you really believe that you can turn into Saquon Barkley in an offense that just gave running backs, I think, around 40% of the carries, and
True.
Kylan Hill had about 30% of those. and a senior, Aris Williams, who has done some great things for Mississippi State, a 1,000-yard rusher as a junior.
But also,
he didn't even get 100 carries. I think he got maybe 50 carries.
I can look that up for you.
But Nick is also going to be gone, and I mean,
the offense is going to be a lot
gonna
different,
change.
and hopefully it's going to be passing heavy. That's what Mississippi State fans wanted this season. It wasn't such, but that was because Nick Fitzgerald is what he is. He's a run-first quarterback, and he's most rushing yards by a quarterback in SEC history. That is what the offense was geared toward. So it could look a lot different, and Joe Moorhead could tell Jerrion, hey, this is what our offense is going to look like now. It didn't look like this last year, but this is what we're going to do now.
Cleaning up for a second before Mackenzie makes her point, Aris Williams, 85 carries.
85 carries.
I was going to say another aspect, even though it's kind of minimal, is the recruiting class that Moorhead got from all the kids in the metro area. You know, Jerrion would be able to play with a bunch of his friends, especially Jarian, who's not quiet on Twitter either about having his friends come with him. I mean, that's another aspect too, even on top of what we've talked about.
At the end of the day, though, we just mentioned how Jerrion is he's going to do what's best for himself. He seems like he's got a level head on his shoulders. He's going to choose what he wants.
He's
so
not doing it for the hype and
if
this and that.
If playing with your friends is what he wants best, then yeah, go to Mississippi State. But you know, if he wants to do what's best for himself, it could be something else.
And for the sake of telling both sides of the story, Moorhead can pitch the Saquon angle, but Ole Miss just hired the most renowned run-first offensive coordinator of the last 2 decades of college football in Rich Rodriguez. As a play caller, he has such a history of developing running backs and running quarterbacks. There's a pitch for the Ole Miss side, but also Ole Miss is returning Scotty Phillips, who was one of the more productive running backs in the SEC when he was healthy last year. I know he missed the last couple of games of the season, but splitting time with Scotty Phillips in a Phil Longo offense, not very appealing for a 5-star running back. Splitting time with Scotty Phillips in a Rich Rodriguez offense, especially if they're going to get Matt Corral out and use him with more mobility than maybe a Phil Longo offense would have been a vertical attack. I do think that there is an allure to come to Ole Miss, and there was a reason that he stayed committed to Ole Miss for so long, even through the Longo era. There was something about Ole Miss that he wanted to be a part of. Obviously, it's hard to turn Clemson down. If Dabo Swinney comes knocking the day after a national championship, there's no coincidence. That's when Jerrion decommitted, the day after or 2 days after a national championship game. Clemson's going to be alluring, and Clemson's got a top 25 baseball program year in, year out. State was in the College World Series last year. Ole Miss was a national seed last year. All 3 teams are primed to be good baseball teams this year and in the future. So all 3 of these schools, there is not a downside. You're going to a school that has great baseball, to a school that has top-level football. I don't want to say great in the case of Ole Miss because they're coming off of a down couple of years, but great baseball programs, football programs that play against the best teams week in and week out. If he chooses if he chooses the college route, he doesn't have a bad choice here. If he doesn't choose the college route, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, we can talk about Jerrion all we want. Ty, I'm not even sure of the answer to this question. What does Mississippi State's running back recruiting room look like if they don't get Jerrion? Did they sign anybody in December? Or are they getting people elsewise?
They've got a junior college guy in Kareem Walker who's expected to sign. He was supposed to sign back in December. He's expected to sign this coming Wednesday. And they also got a late bloomer out of Alabama. He only played 1 year of college or high school ball. His name's eluding me, so if someone wants to look that up. But they got a guy this guy set the record in Alabama high school for the most rushing yards in a season.
Wow.
I think he had the most touchdowns in a season. Obviously, he's playing against competition that he's a little better than, but he will be in that running back room in the mix. And then obviously you have Kylan Hill. Kylan Hill is going to be right now.
Are you talking about Lee Witherspoon?
That's the name, okay. Lee Witherspoon. If you look up his numbers, they're ridiculous. He rushed for over 2,000 yards. I think it was closer to 3,000.
In relation to the Witherspoon brothers?
No, different spelling as well.
Any relation to the actress?
Same spelling as that, I believe. Anyway, Jerrion, he would have a good shot at getting a lot of touches, but here's the thing. Anywhere he goes, he might have to split carries. Even Clemson, Travis Etienne is going to be a junior.
He's the best running back in the country.
And Najee Harris is still at Alabama, correct? Or did he go pro?
Alabama's got running backs. backs.
Alabama has running back.
Alabama has
I think he was an underclassman, so he must still be
Alabama
there.
has a lot of things.
Yeah, anywhere he goes, he's going to have to split carries. So
That's true. I mean, from the Ole Miss perspective, you're talking about Witherspoon, you're talking about the JUCO kid coming in. Ole Miss only has one running back signed for this class. His name is Snoop Connor, who I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, as I am, Mackenzie. He played quarterback all throughout high school. He's a running back by trade, but he played quarterback down in Hattiesburg all the last 2 years. I expect Snoop to get some carries, but Isaiah Woolard's coming back. Scotty Phillips is obviously coming back. Eric Swinney's probably not coming back. He's in the transfer portal. But otherwise, Ole Miss could really use this. Scotty's going to be a senior. I like Isaiah Woolard, but he's a secondary option. And then you look at Snoop Connor coming in. How's he going to adjust? If Rich Rod wants to run his Pat White offense, maybe you stick Snoop at quarterback. But as a running back, he's going to have some lumps to take this spring as he adjusts to the position.
And make no mistake, if Jerrion went to Mississippi State, sort of like Kylan Hill in his freshman year, he would get a lot of carries right away. You would still expect Kylan Hill to be the main guy, but Mississippi State could really use him too, because if you're adding him to a mix of a bunch of unproven guys like Kareem Walker, the junior college guy, and Witherspoon, the high school guy coming in, if you add him to that, Jerrion is obviously the guy with the most upside out of those players. So, yeah, he could make an impact right away if he chose Mississippi State.
So we've talked a lot about Jerrion, deservedly so, but let's go through
There are some other guys.
Let's go through some of the other names in Mississippi that we expect to sign with major programs on this upcoming Wednesday. The first name that comes to mind from your neck of the woods, Ty, Charles Moore out of Louisville. State's on the table?
He decommitted about a month ago.
I mean, sorry, I just interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, like, I remember, was it his junior year, I was told he got injured, set out, but State still stuck with him through it. And then recently he decommitted.
He decommitted about a month ago, and he was hurt for a lot of his senior year too, but this is still a guy, he's a borderline 5-star guy.
6'4", 270 is a strong side end.
And when you look at everything that Mississippi State lost on the defensive line, it was one of the best defensive lines in America last year, but they lost everybody. Montez Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, Gary Green, Braxton Hoyette, they're all gone. Those are all of your starters on the defensive line. You are going to sign Nathan Pickering. You would think that's probably 90+%, maybe even 100. He's come out and tweeted in the past week saying that he's pretty much all in on Hail State. So that helps a lot on your defensive line. And granted, Mississippi State has a lot of good defensive line players coming back who got to learn from those All-America type players. But if you get a guy like Charles Moore, whether he was injured or not, you know, that is program changing.
Especially them building him up. Absolutely. He's a big guy already.
Absolutely.
I'm holding a water balloon over your head, and I say I'm going to drop it if you don't make a decision. Is Charles Moore going to sign with Mississippi State?
No.
Okay, that's kind of the way most people are leaning. He's currently 79% Auburn in the 247.
That's gone up a lot since I last looked.
It is not looking great for State, but he is also State is still on the table. We're going to keep going through some of the unsigned prospects. You mentioned Nathan Pickering. He seems like a strong State lean. He's the next highest rated player that is unsigned. Do you have something to say, Mackenzie?
I use in overtime right now with Michigan State. Sorry. Just wanted to throw that in. No, but I mean, the next one that comes to my mind, obviously, John Rice.
Yes, I was going to get to John Rice in a second. There's one player in between Pickering and John Rice, and that being Byron Young down at West Jones. He's committed to Alabama. I think he's probably going to stay with Alabama.
He's said that a lot throughout the season.
But then we get to John Rice Plumlee. He's still committed to Georgia. He has not decommitted from Georgia by any stretch, but it's looking like Georgia's not going to be the option. I got to watch John Rice play a couple of times, 3 or 4 times this year when he was a senior at Oak Grove. Is he going to be a quarterback at the next level? Is he going to be a safety at the next level? There are questions, but one thing you can't question is production. And except for the game against Hattiesburg this year where he seemed a little bit overmatched, he produced pretty much every time he came out.
Even at State, they were close pretty much the whole game, and I think he threw a pick last minute.
Yeah, a late pick.
And, no, I mean, from what I saw him, especially when he came and played Brandon, he used his running game against them so much, especially in that rain. They knew he was going to run the whole time. He just blazed through that defensive line.
And funny coincidence, if you want to call it a coincidence, he's going to be playing baseball wherever he goes too. Exactly. He is a two-sport athlete as well. He was at Ole Miss last weekend, the same day Jerrion was at Ole Miss, and they both posed in the classic Bo Jackson pose with shoulder pads and a baseball bat over their shoulders, which, side note, bad idea. Bad idea to compare anyone to Bo Jackson before they've gotten to college. Jerrion could be Bo Jackson. For all we know, John Rice Plumlee could be Bo Jackson.
The sad part about all of this is they probably think that they were mimicking Kyler Murray, who did it a couple. These kids are young, man. I'm young, but these kids are even younger. So it's possible.
It's possible, but that's just a little diversion from myself where don't compare yourself to Bo Jackson. That picture is going to be on the internet forever. If you're the best football player ever, people are still going to be like, oh, you compared yourself to Bo Jackson. Are you really Bo Jackson? Which... we're all young. None of us watched Bo Jackson. We shouldn't talk too much about it. I have my doubts about him being as good as our parents told us he was, because nobody is that.
You might get some backlash for that comment. Just say.
No, I'm sure I'm going to get some backlash because I just acknowledged I don't know. But that's just a diversion. We're talking about John Rice Plumlee. Do you think State's on the table for Plumlee? Because I think right now it's Ole Miss has the lead would be my assumption.
If he's staying in State, then it's probably Ole Miss. I would give it less than 5% chance that he's going to Mississippi State. Because when you look at Mississippi State's quarterbacks, Keaton Thompson is coming back. He's going to be a junior. He's your likely starter. But I guess it was 2 months ago now in December, you signed Garrett Schrader out of North Carolina. And all indications are that he might be the guy that actually starts this season. Yeah. And then you have a guy behind them, Jalen Maiden, who is solidified as the third stringer. John Rice really doesn't fit anywhere into this quarterback room, and I really don't see him going to Mississippi State.
I mean, the 247 crystal ball right now has John Rice 100% towards Ole Miss.
100%.
100% towards Ole Miss.
Yes,
he's still committed to
I
Georgia.
I said less than
Georgia's
5%,
got a chance,
but I should say less than 1.
About the Georgia option, I mean, if he were to go to Georgia, I know it's a whole blue shirt thing that would happen. He'd be like fifth string quarterback maybe with
blue shirt, gray shirt. There's a lot.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out their thing. I mean, like you said, he's still committed there, but is that the smart thing to do if he's wanting playing time? And also, he'd have to.
By the same token, as what Ty was saying, Ole Miss signed 2 quarterbacks in December as well. They signed Grant Tisdale out of Allen, Texas, and they signed Kincaid Dent out of down in Jackson. They signed these 2 quarterbacks, and Matt Corral is a freshman. He redshirted last year. He only played in 4 games. He's a redshirt freshman. So you're looking at, if you sit behind Jake Fromm, you're not going to play over Jake Fromm this year. Jake Fromm is a probable first-round pick. But if you don't beat out Matt Corral this year, there's a chance you don't get to beat out Matt Corral for 2-3 years, which there's a calculated risk if you pick Ole Miss, and that's not even mentioning Grant Tisdale or Kincaid Dent, and it's also not mentioning Rich Rod. John Rice Plumlee fits what Rich Rod does. He's more of a mobile quarterback. He's more of a dual-threat quarterback than Matt Corral was or that Kincaid Dent was in high school. Grant Tisdale was very much a dual-threat quarterback in Texas, so he fits that mold. But if Rich Rod wants to look for somebody like Khalil Tate, like Denard Robinson, like Pat White, these quarterbacks he's succeeded with in the past, that has to play into what John Rice is thinking. Hey, I can do that.
Basically, the talk that we've just had over the last 15 minutes, and especially when you bring up Rich Rodriguez a couple times, Mississippi State has a good shot of stealing the signing day buzz, especially if Jerrion goes and if they get John Rice Plumlee, because those are 2 huge in-state guys that pretty much everyone in the state has all eyes on for National Signing Day. And if Ole Miss gets both of them, then that is a huge optimism booster for the program.
Yeah, let's run through some other names. For one thing that we can probably feel comfortable about Ole Miss, for Jonathan Mingo from down in Brandon. Yes. We're pretty comfortable he's going to stay with Ole Miss. He's been committed for a while.
Yeah, I remember there was a little bit of time where it was like, he may, but no, he's.
There's the offensive tackle out of Ocean Springs, Brandon Cunningham. Looks like a pretty solid state commit. You thinking he's going to fit into the final plan?
He should sign.
And then there's one guy, Jamon Gordon, down in Meridian. He's 80% Ole Miss. He's a 3-star. He's the only other, or he's one of 2 other top 20 players in Mississippi who is unsigned at the moment, the other being Zach Edwards from Starkville. Doesn't seem like he's going to be staying in Starkville.
No, he's not on the radar.
But yeah, Jamon Gordon is probably an Ole Miss lean at this point. It's hard to say for sure, but he's projected 80% towards Ole Miss. And then that's pretty much the tops of the state. There are a couple of other odds and ends guys, a couple of 3-stars who are considering some group of 5 schools. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating
early signing day was the one we had to get.
That was the haul. That was when we knew a lot of guys would sign, and we had to make sure that they did and then do their thing. Today or this coming week is going to be those big names like we talked about, and just where are they going to go.
And let's talk about December for a little bit, because I know we talked about before this that we wanted to address just our general thoughts on the signing classes. I'll get to my thoughts on Ole Miss's class in a second, but Ty, the first, I guess you can call this the first full class that Joe Moorhead has had a chance to recruit. What are your impressions?
What do you rank it? I want to ask you both your rankings, because you guys both know the recruiting classes a little bit more than me, because you guys obviously cover it for the beat. What would you rank Moorhead and the team's recruiting?
Like as an A to F scale, like a grade.
Yeah.
Probably a B+. There's not a lot of guys on here. Once you sign Pickering, and maybe if you get Charles Moore, then those are a couple guys that kind of jump off the page. You're like, well, Mississippi State signed those 2 guys. But I'd still give it a B+, because he signed a lot of guys that he needed. I think they signed 5 or 6 offensive linemen. In an SEC, any SEC school needs offensive linemen. And he got his potential quarterback of the future, too, that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, is Garrett Schrader. A lot of guys don't have too much confidence in Keaton Thompson, because he started a full game for Nick Fitzgerald this year, who got suspended.
More development.
He's kind of like a mini Nick Fitzgerald in the sense that he's not a polished passer. He's going to look to run any chance he gets. He's a little different style runner than Nick. So a lot of guys are in Starkville. They don't know if Keaton is going to be the guy that Joe Moorhead needs. Is it Garrett Schrader? Who knows? He's an early enrollee, so he's going to go through all of spring ball, and he's already had a few practices under his belt. So I think when you look at Schrader and then you look at some of these other guys that he was able to sign, Charles Cross is a really good offensive lineman out of Laurel, a 5-star guy. He got bumped up to 5-star after what he did at the All-American game. And you have a guy in King Ani who is from Nashville, Tennessee. He's another defensive lineman. I talked about the need to fill that vacancy.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'd give it a B+.
Your
turn, Nick.
You're a Parcells guy, right?
I like Bill Parcells.
Guy. He had this model that he built his teams around, which was pretty much inside out. You start with the offensive and defensive lines, and once that is built, you can get everything else. That's what State's doing. That's what Ole Miss is doing as well. I'd probably give this class a B, B-, but the main thing that can jack it up to an A is Ole Miss can sign people this year. They have been under scholarship reduction for too long. The team has been severely limited in what it can go after and who it can go after. And because of that, there have been so many depth concerns. Ole Miss is just trying to find depth. And you look at the breakdown of this class, they've signed 8 offensive linemen. They've signed 6 defensive backs. They've signed 3 defensive linemen. And I'm expecting, and when I say signed plus commits, I'm expecting that 3 to go up to 4, 5, 6 on signing day, because they're really going to go after defensive linemen and linebackers on this February signing period. Then you got your 2 quarterbacks, you've got your running back, you've got your 5 wide receivers. You are building with the key positions, your offensive line, your defensive line, and your defensive backfield. And that's where the depth comes in. Those are the positions, along with wide receiver, where you're replacing a trio of uber-talented future NFL receivers. You're building the depth at places that you have been understaffed for quite a while. Does that mean these guys are going to star immediately as freshmen and as junior college transfers? I would be shocked. There are a couple of guys in this class. Sam Williams comes to mind, who was the best pass rusher in junior college this year. He came away with more sacks than anybody else in all of junior college. He's going to be productive. There are a couple of other guys I look at, some of these wide receivers, they're going to have to play to replace A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf and DeMarcus Lodge. But I think what they're building is a future. They're trying to build depth. They're trying to prove, hey, maybe if 2019 isn't the most productive season, At least we're getting reps to players who are going to help us be successful in 2020, in 2021, in 2022. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, that's better than winning in 2019. Having a stopgap of, oh, this year was great, but it's all going to crumble, is not as good as having another bad year, which nobody wants a bad year. But that's how you rebuild. You don't rebuild overnight unless you magically get Trevor Lawrence to transfer to Ole Miss or something. Like it's not that simple. And I think Ole Miss is making the right choices. Obviously, if you get Jerry on, if you get some of these guys, the class looks a lot different. But as it looks now, you're looking like you got 2 or 3 junior college guys who are going to play immediately in the secondary and on the defensive line. You got a lot of offensive linemen because you have to replace 3 or 4 starters from last year. Hopefully they can work as both stopgaps and as productive players. But more than anything else, you have 32 scholarships this year. Use them to the best of your ability, get as many bodies as possible, and finally be a complete team.
Yeah, and I don't think you can really compare Mississippi State to Ole Miss in a sense that they completely had different seasons. They ended off differently. Like you said, Ole Miss, I don't really think it could be worse from here. I think it only could go up, which is very good news. But also, they're like you said, they're building for the future. They're looking for that depth. And I think a B-, like you said, would be a great rating.
For sure. B- would be a drastic improvement over what have been the last 2 years.
Especially who they're losing, like you said, A.J. Brown.
Yeah, you're losing most of your offense. It's not just A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and DeMarcus Lodge at receiver. It's Dawson Knox at tight end. It's Jordan Ta'amu at quarterback. It's Greg Little at left tackle. It's Javon Patterson at guard. It's Sean Rollins at center. You are losing so much talent from this offense. And the offense is what made the team 5-7 last year. You can say 5-7 is a disappointment. Yeah. Without this offense, that's a 2 or 3 win team right there. Yep. I mean, let's not forget the Southern Illinois game. The offense was necessary against a team like Southern Illinois. So there's a lot of attrition. You obviously have to build from there. But this signing class is definitely an upgrade because you're getting buds.
I want to say one more thing about Mississippi State that might concern some Bulldog fans is you've sort of replenished the areas that you were already really good at.
That's kind of, yeah.
You were really good on the offensive line last year, and you went offensive line heavy. And I know that, Nick, you were talking about you win from within, outside in type thing or whatever. Inside out. Bill Parcells, if you want to learn from Bill Parcells, then that's a really good thing to do because he was a really successful head coach. Anyway, at some point you're going to have to start getting guys that you don't have. Mississippi State does not have good receivers. Ole Miss has had better receivers for a few years now. Probably this.
If only there was a high-ranking receiver out of Starkville High that they could have recruited. Nothing comes to mind.
Right, and you have to get guys.
I have jokes.
A lot of guys in Starkville don't like to talk about him or.
I know.
Whenever his face would come on the
whenever
his face would come on the video board in Ole Miss and he'd say he's from Starkville, just applauds everywhere.
Yeah, we want to talk about wide receivers though. Mississippi State, their best receivers that they signed in this class are 3-star guys. Yep. And 3-star guys aren't going to change your passing game the way Joe Moorhead needs to change this passing game. He still needs to figure out who his quarterback is. And then on top of that, who's the quarterback throwing the ball to? Because last year there was a bunch of guys who couldn't catch, couldn't run routes, and you have those same guys back. Osiris Mitchell had drop problems. Stephen Guidry can't run a physical route. He can't get off the line of scrimmage. You still have those guys back. So are these Quentin Tarber coming in? And Keisaiah Pruitt, he's a local guy near Starkville out of Noxubee County. Are those guys going to change your passing game? On paper, it looks like no. They're 3-star guys who are good pieces at SEC schools, but are they the guys that you're going to count on to get 1,000-yard seasons like Ole Miss has had out of their wide receivers? No.
Super valid point from Mr. Tyler Horka. And with that, we've been going for about 40 minutes here. Let's just finish off with 5 minutes of fun. Let's talk about whatever we want to talk about because I think we've pretty much run the gamut on signing day, have we not?
I agree.
Be sure to follow the Clarion Ledger and all of us on the tweets all day on Wednesday, as well as Wilson Alexander, our coworker. Please follow. Esteemed. That's the word I was looking for. Please.
I have some fun stuff I want to talk about. All right, so recently, if you guys do follow me on Twitter, then you would have seen the tweet I just recently quote tweeted. It was from I don't even know what account it was, but it was from the kitchen is what it said.
Oh, yeah. I tweeted this as well.
Yeah, so they said, here are the most popular Super Bowl snacks in every state according to Google. And so where I'm from, Indiana, it said fried rice. And I quote tweeted it and I said, I've never had fried rice at a Super Bowl party or heard anyone Googling fried rice.
And, it's much more egregious for Ty's home state because the answer was not queso.
Yeah, I was looking for queso or chips and salsa or anything like that. However, spinach dip is actually an acceptable Super Bowl food, so at least...
And they got my home state right. Like, they got the actual right answer.
Oh, so funny.
It was buffalo chicken dip, correct?
Yeah. Okay,
right
Mississippi granola bars. Who looks up granola bars for Super Bowl snacks? And I had so many people reply and say, if there's granola bars, leave immediately.
A granola bar is something I want to eat on the way to the gym. And let me tell you, I'm not working out on Super Bowl Sunday.
I know.
So granola bars are all sorts of wrong.
Anyone who follows Very Online Person Nick Suss knows that Very Online Person Nick Suss is the patron saint and superior defender of the oatmeal raisin cookie. And it was raised to me the similarity between an oatmeal raisin cookie and a granola bar, not that far off. So I'm not going to talk crap about granola bars.
No, I would never talk crap about them. But Super Bowl food?
But in the context of a Super Bowl, that is a horrible
lame.
thing.
But I think the funniest one of them all was the vegan cheesy bacon spinach dip out west. Does that even make sense? Vegan cheesy bacon spinach.
But it is a dip, and I do like the dip chips.
If it's vegan, what are you using for the bacon and the cheese? Are you just using like fake?
I have no idea.
That was my little nugget.
Is fakin the word you were looking for?
Fakin bacon. Oh, maybe it's tofurkey, where it's like tofu jerky.
That's what the point of this is. But I was not. Fakin exists. That wasn't me making a pun.
Oh.
But if we look at this map, Ty, do you want to read this and what state it is, just to see some other nonsense?
New Mexico is pea and peppercorn mash.
I didn't even see that one.
I have no idea what that is.
What is like?
Lentil soup. Like, what are some of these?
You moved on from that mash very quickly, and I don't know how because I have
still
no idea what that is.
I don't know what peppercorn is.
Okay, so presumably this is going up Super Bowl Sunday. Presumably this podcast is alive. What are your Super Bowl snacks? We're all going to be watching the Super Bowl together in my apartment where we're recording right now. I have not gone shopping for snacks, so tell me what you want me to buy.
I'm good with one of those really mainstream snack trays that's got the crackers, it's got the cheese, it's got veggies, and like ham and turkey or something.
On the same level.
It's really easy because you can get a lot of things right there. However, I do like to fill up a little bit, so before that I'm probably going to have to eat some chicken wings or some pizza. Chicken wings or pizza, that's usually the main course, and then I just kind of graze on the snack tray.
All right, Mackenzie, what do you think? What are you thinking?
Probably my favorite Super Bowl party food is wings, boneless wings. I know people don't like boneless, but me, wings. Oh, so
who doesn't like chicken nuggets? Boneless wings
That's
are
what I'm
chicken
saying,
nuggets.
but honey barbecue.
Yeah, those are honey barbecue chicken nuggets. They're good, but they're chicken nuggets. Let's stop pretending that boneless wings are a thing. They're chicken nuggets.
No, I agree with that. Take 100%.
Yeah, we all like chicken nuggets. They're great.
What about you?
What about me?
Yeah.
I'm a just like casual grazer when it comes to sports. I don't want to sit down and watch a full meal. There are a couple slices of pizza. That might be the thickest I go, but trail mix, chips, dips, salsas. I'm going to keep it easy there. And now that we've all established what we like for the Super Bowl, let's establish how people can get in touch with us on the onlines. Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. Now you're going to get to the spiel. We're going to try and do these as frequently as we can, maybe once a week. It might not be all three of us. It's rare that we are all in the same room together, but we're going to try and do these as many as possible. Sometimes they'll be themed. Sometimes we'll have guests. Also, let us know what you want to hear from this podcast. Thank
Please
you
be
guys.
nice.
Yeah. I mean, review if you want, but more so, just tell Mackenzie she's great. She likes to hear it.
Oh, what makes you say that? That makes it sound like I'm like, oh, I want you to hear
Everybody likes hearing they're great. You find me one person who doesn't like hearing they're
Everyone
great.
tell Nick he's great. He
Thank
likes
you.
oatmeal raisin cookies.
I do.
Who would argue with that?
I
Unless
do.
You're
So,
anti-American.
Ty, how can they follow you?
You can follow me at TB Horka
Yeah, that's on Twitter.
on Twitter.
And be sure to email all of your complaints to him. He's thorka@gannett.com. Email all of your praise to Mackenzie. She's msalmon@gannett.com. And
Mackenzie Salmon, MacKenziEsalmon. Follow me.
And I'm at Nick Suss. That's NICKSUSS. Email me at nsuss@gannett.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back whenever we decide to be back.
See you soon.
And until then, thanks for listening, Mississippi.
See y'all.